to get involved in all aspects of the community, to have a thriving community and life here in Brattleboro and the surrounding areas. I want to thank Jamie for putting this all together, Cindy for agreeing to moderate, the candidates for coming on board with this, and all of you listening in and watching. I really appreciate that. It makes it all worthwhile. Jeff?
You said pretty much everything that I wanted to, but I'll introduce myself, Melanie. My name is Jeff Potter. I'm the editor-in-chief at the Commons and have been for almost 15 years now. I am thrilled that both the Reformer and the Commons were able to hop on and work on this in a pretty short time with the Herculean organizational efforts of Jamie, who had this great idea and through sheer brute force of will helped make this happen. So thank you all for coming. I hope this gives everybody an opportunity to meet the candidates in what is probably one of the most important public servant roles that in the region. So with that, let's have at it.
I just want one more plug for BCTV. They are recording this and broadcasting this for us. So thank you very much for your expertise. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And that's it.
I'm Cindy Jerome. I'm the Dummerston Town Moderator and was happy to help out when Jamie asked me to moderate this meeting. I want to mention that Town Meeting Day is next. It was several Tuesdays from now, March 1st. Ballots are ready. If you'd like to vote absentee, you can call or email your town clerk to get your ballot. Some of you may have already gotten one in the mail, or you can vote in person. You can find in either of the papers, I'm sure, where to go to do that on the day of town meeting. I also want to mention that David Wheeler was a candidate for the school board from Dummerston, running against Deborah Stanford for the open position there. He has made the decision to bow out. His name will still be on the ballot. You could vote for him, but he will not accept the position if elected. Jeff, you were maybe going to do some research about that.
I was maybe going to do it, and honest to God, I just couldn't have. I just didn't.
I'm sure there's some authority who would appoint someone if David was elected, but because he will not accept the position.
Cindy, let me just hop in and say that the link that we publicized for this event, we will be putting some links to candidate profiles and some of the material that you've seen or should have seen in both of our papers. And that's something that we can put up there as well. And I was hoping to get that up there by Friday.
Very good. Okay. Please do ensure that you're muted. We also suggest that you turn off your video unless you are a candidate or one of the leaders of the group. Jamie, I wonder if you would like to turn on your camera and wave to folks and say hello. We really are grateful to Jamie.
Hi, I'm Jamie Comtois, and I'm with the Putney Central School Leadership Council and a longtime fan of democratic process. So liking to boister it wherever I can. So thanks.
Thank you, Jamie. I want to remind you all that every voter in the entire Windham Southeast School District votes on every open position. You're not just voting for the person from your town, which is why I'm sure a lot of you are here tonight, because even if you don't live in Brattleboro, you know there is a contested race between Peter Fishcase and Lana Dever, both of Brattleboro. Questions. This is a community event and we ask for respect all around. Questions must be respectful. If your question is not respectful, we will move on to the next question. I will start by asking Jeff and Melanie to each pose one question, and then I'll be opening it up to all of you. If you would like to ask a question, you must be a resident of the district. You must live in Brattleboro, Guilford, Dummerston, or Putney. To ask a question, you'll use the raise hand function, which you'll find under reactions at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you hover your cursor down there, it will appear. You press the button to raise your hand and then again to lower your hand after you've been called upon. If you are calling in over a telephone, you can raise your hand by doing *9 and then lower it again. And I will see your hand and call on you. When I call on you to ask your question, I'll ask you to unmute and turn on your video. Although video is not required, you don't have to show yourself when asking your question, but please remember to mute yourself again when you're done. I'll ask you to state your name and your town. I'll ask you to try to keep your question brief. We want the candidates to have the chance to answer as many questions as they can. And I will allow brief follow-up or clarifying questions on the same topic if there's time. Candidates, I'll ask you to keep your answers to 2 minutes. If you hear this, you'll need to wrap it up. Did you hear that? Is that audible? Good, okay. This is an old Christmas bell from my childhood, so it's got nice memories with it for me. So thank you, let's begin. We'll start by asking each candidate to make a statement introducing themselves and why they're running for the school board. Then I'll ask Melanie and Jeff for questions, and then the rest of you will have your opportunity. We'll give each candidate up to 5 minutes, and we'll start with Lana Dever of Brattleboro.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to introduce myself. It's nice to see so many faces. I see some names I recognize. Thank you to everyone who put this together, especially Jamie. You are absolutely fantastic. I'm a longtime resident of Brattleboro. I'm the mother of a 10-year-old fifth grader and a stepmom to a 20-year-old college student. I currently work at youth services for young folks in our community facing homelessness. I grew up in and out of homelessness, moving around the country, attending countless schools along the way. My life was saved for the strangers who took me in and loved me like their own, and the teachers who provided me the support and routine that I desperately needed. I moved to Brattleboro in 2003. I've lived here longer than I've lived anywhere else. This is the only home I know, and I've done the work to make it my own. Over the past 18 years, I've been fortunate enough to get to know the residents of our community in almost every capacity, whether it be from waiting on you at your favorite restaurant, working on your teeth, or serving alongside you at a local organization. I can say with certainty that I know this community pretty well. I've worked hard to plant my roots here. It's not always been easy. At times I've had to work multiple jobs to pay the bills, but what I have to keep me going is the community that supports me. I like to say that my superpower is relationships. I have the ability to make and maintain connections with people across divides. I also have a very good memory. I remember the people I've met, no matter how small our interaction. And during my 18 years here, I have met so many of you. I recognize your children for whom I used to pick out books at the bookseller, who are now grown adults. How did that happen? I remember my regular customers from the various restaurants I worked for in town, as well as all of the cashiers and service workers who have waited on me over the years. I see each and every one of you as a valued member of my community. And though you may not remember me, I remember you. I see you. And you are the reason I love this community. You are the reason that I'm running for the school board. My campaign is a love letter to Windham County. I'm running for the school board because I believe that a successful society starts from the ground up. Schools are the foundation upon which we build future generations of Vermonters. We must support the parents and educators who are working hard to stay afloat. If we are able to keep our schools at the forefront of education, we can continue to encourage Vermonters to stay and continue to raise families here. And we can continue to grow and to bring on more people who share our vision. I want to support that effort in any way that I can. I know that I am capable of finding common ground with all members of our community, and that together we can work to find solutions to the challenges that we face. From experience, I have learned that each of us at our core seeks the same things: love, safety, and to be seen and heard. We need school board members who are capable of meeting that need, and I am the woman for that job. I'm struck by the fact that in 2021, sorry, isn't that crazy? 2022, as a woman of color, I face many of the same barriers that my mother faced and her mother before her, going on and on for generations. I still live in a world of firsts. The first Black woman to serve on the Supreme Court, the first Black woman to serve as vice president. Yes, there has been change. And no, I do not wish to live in my grandmother's America, but I hope that I will want to live in my granddaughter's America. I hope that by the time my granddaughter is born, she will not live in a world of firsts. My hope is that she can simply be. I look to my community, and here I envision the world in which I wish to live. Electing the first Black women to serve together on the school board means one less step closer to an equitable society where every Vermonter has a seat at the table. We are already a rich and diverse community. We need to make sure that that diversity is represented in our leadership. Lots of folks are wondering what they can do, how in this historical moment they can help foster change. This is what you can do. You can elect the first 2 Black women to serve together on the United School Board so that we can work with you to create the future where each and every resident of our community is cared for, beginning with our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Lana. Next, we have Peter Fishcase.
Thank you. And thanks again for putting this whole thing together. I think it's important to learn about the candidates. The hardest thing for me to do is to tell you why I'm more qualified or a better candidate than someone else. I often get called a loudmouth because I speak about things I'm passionate about, and I do so fearlessly. I have a very refined sense of fairness and justice, and when I'm called to defend those things, I can become, let's say, animated. One thing I don't assume is that I'm better than anyone, more important than anyone, nor do I deserve things that I don't work for. But if you're running for a public seat like this one, I guess you have to do that to a certain degree. I, again, am running for the open seat for the Windham Southeast Board for Brattleboro, and I'm looking for your vote on March 1st. Now, collaboration through communication for me is what it's all about. Conversations where it begins, bring a proposal, an issue, an idea, commentary with some sort of solution, even if that solution is so far-fetched, it can make big things happen. If we're discussing it, we can resolve it, whatever the proverbial it is. I want to reestablish an actionable connection between the board, administrators, faculty, kids, and community. I've already begun conversations in the schools and the communities and with community leaders. And those conversations have led to one common thread, which is there seems to be very little communication happening. If I'm elected, I will create a more robust, ongoing communication with all. I don't believe in making decisions from 30,000 feet. I want to make decisions from a ground level. That's what affects change. I'm originally from Queens, New York, but did a majority of my growing up in Wilmington, Vermont. I moved to Brattleboro 32 years ago, served on the Boys and Girls Club. I volunteered doing Morningside Shelter fundraisers. I joined different boards after that, the Brattleboro Area Drop-In Center, Project Feed the Thousands, Groundworks Collaborative, Girls on the Run, Members First Credit Union. I chaired the Windham County Relay for Life for many years. I currently serve as the Vice President of Black Mountain Assisted Family Living, which provides permanent housing for individuals with developmental delays. I also serve on subcommittees for the Alzheimer's Association and others. I'm a town meeting rep, and I am currently working on a subcommittee for the current board to help select the next superintendent. Serving is something I do, and I do willingly. I get called to action a lot. After September 11, 2001, I organized a fundraiser for the United Way to help their 9/11 fund and was recognized for that on a national level. I was the driving force behind raising money for those displaced by the Brooks House fire. And when Tropical Storm Irene devastated our landscape, I once again found myself in the trenches using everything at my disposal and was again recognized with a state resolution commendation. When COVID hit and everything shut down, I did my call to action series with a tremendous amount of help from BCTV, and they were gracious enough to give me their producer of the year for those efforts so I could disseminate good, incredible information. I also helped secure smart devices for people who didn't have them so they could connect with family, doctors, friends, school. I've been meeting with principals, as many as I can, in the lead up to this election to create an open and honest dialogue. I I want to know what this board can do to help them. I want to have an open line of communication with the next superintendent, which is why I was interested in serving a committee that would put forth candidates to the actual board. I want their campaign speeches. I want their philosophies before the day-to-day of running a school district can wear them down. I'm supposed to be on the final interview right now, but felt the need it was important for me to be here. So as soon as my job is done here, I will likely jump back onto that call. If you don't know me, hopefully that provides a snapshot of who I am and how seriously and level of dedication I have for my community at large. I say all this with the utmost humility. I'm a person that doesn't like to boast about accomplishments because I believe we should do things without adulation. One of my favorite quotes is from a man called Gino Bartali. He was a champion cyclist in Italy in the 30s and 40s while the fascist government was taking over. Under the guise of long training rides, he would smuggle false documents in the tubes of his bike to help those that were targeted by that fascist government so that they could gain safe harbor. He never talked about it, he just did it. When they found out about it, they asked him, "Why didn't you ever say anything?" And he said, "Because good is something you do, not something you talk about. Some medals are pinned to your soul and not to your jacket." I try to live by that every single day. But I will ask you, as voting has already begun, if you can see and find the benefit in anything that I've had to say or know me, I would ask that you vote for me on March 1st. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Deborah Stanford from Dummerston.
Good evening. Thank you to everyone who has been instrumental in organizing this forum. My name is Deborah Stanford and my home is Dummerston. After 28 years at the Horace Mann School, I officially retired in August 2018. The following academic year, I collaborated with my peers who had also completed a rigorous program courtesy of SEED, Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity, that prepared us to organize and facilitate monthly professional workshops designed for faculty, staff, and administrators. The process of discovery was amazing. I learned so much from my co-facilitators and colleagues in this endeavor. And now it was time for me to accept my retirement and move on. My friends in New York, no doubt, were concerned for my mental stability. I was giving up a rent-stabilized apartment on 87th Street and West End Avenue, where I had lived for 42 years. Sane people do not do that in Manhattan. But it was time for me to move on. As of August 2019, I am finally here. I needed to be close to my son and extended family in Brattleboro. After 35 years as an educator and as a facilitator of difficult conversations, I needed to take a break and get settled in my new home. Only 7 months later, we were all affected by the restrictions of a worldwide pandemic. I obeyed the warnings that people in my demographic needed to remain healthy in light of an overwhelmed healthcare system, and I did that. But I also realized that something vital was missing. I missed the energy of collaboration. I missed unraveling the difficult questions and difficult situations that characterize what it means to be human. I missed problem solving and strategizing ways to create change for the better. Since last August, I have attended school board meetings, at first in person and now via Zoom. I am no longer in the classroom, in the trenches. I am on the other side, and I am fueled by all that I am experiencing and learning. A school community is a school community, public or private. We celebrate similar successes and we are faced with similar problems. I do not have answers. Rather, I am still processing the many questions that will lead us to solutions. And even if I were an all-seeing wizard, and I am not, Each situation requires its own process, demands its own solution. As Michaela Sims said at the last board meeting, and I paraphrase, there is not a one-size-fits-all solution. Problematic eruptions will always exist. After all, we are human. But perhaps with care, they will be fewer in occurrence and less toxic. Perhaps we can rally more quickly to protect those who are most vulnerable, the students, because we have developed the skills and tools, because we practice what we preach, because, as Emily Murphy-Carr said at the most recent board meeting, and I paraphrase, we may be working hard, but are we working smart? Good intentions are not enough. It is not enough to read the book. We need to create better habits through deliberate, intentional practice. I am passionate about my own process of learning. My good intentions are flawed if they hurt another person. Only I can assume full responsibility for my blind spots. And when I am aware of what I did not know, now it is incumbent on me to learn and to change. So this is who I am. These are my values. This is what I bring to the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. And now we'll hear from Shaun Murphy from Guilford.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Shaun Murphy and I live in Guilford. I would like to thank the organizers of this forum for the opportunity to speak to the as a candidate for the position of director on the WSESD. I moved to Vermont 55 years ago in 1967 to attend Windham College in Putney. After graduation from college, I moved to Guilford 53 years ago in 1969. I am a retired builder, having worked in woodworking and construction for 50 years. I have two children who both attended Guilford Central School and BUHS. My wife worked as an environmental educator for many years as a trainer of the well-known ELF and Four Winds Nature Program. I was appointed to the BUHS District 6 Board in 2003 and served subsequent terms on the high school board until the State Board of Education merged our 5-town supervisory union into a 2-district supervisory union. I then ran for a position on the merged board, the WSESD. Currently, I serve on 4 committees of that board: Personnel, Policy and Amendment, Social Justice, and also Finance, which I have the privilege to chair. I am the WSESD representative to the Guilford Leadership Advisory Council and regularly attend meetings twice a month with that group. There are numerous reasons why I would like to serve another term on the WSESD board for the next 3 years. I am an advocate for public education. I understand the importance of public education. I am familiar with the opportunities and challenges inherent in operating our 4-town Putney, Dummerston, Guilford, Brattleboro single district structure. And yet there is still much to learn and issues to be clarified and reconciliation to be achieved. I am glad to report that the process of the continuation of change that will afford all students access to quality education is progressing. Our district is made up of many dedicated administrators and staff working collaboratively to achieve common goals and not shirking from difficult challenges. The WSESD is made up of 9 schools with over 2,300 students, over 420 staff throughout 4 towns. Our Union High School receives students from our 4 district towns, in addition to students from the town of Vernon, which is a single district town in our supervisory union. Guilford, Brattleboro, and Vernon middle school students attend BAMS. Putney and Dummerston middle school students attend middle school within their respective towns. The WSESD is very important to our community. I would like to play a part in its continued challenges and success, looking for solutions and positive outcomes for all students. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shaun. And now we'll turn to Melanie Winters from the Reformer to ask a question that we'll ask each candidate to answer.
Thank you, Cindy. It's no secret it's been a very difficult 2 years under COVID restrictions. It's been especially hard on the schools. The kids are stressed out. The teachers are stressed out. Mental health issues, disciplinary issues, academic issues, all coming to a head. Plus, of course, there's all the other societal issues, irregardless of COVID. So there are some challenges going forward as we try to emerge out of COVID. There are also possibly some opportunities in terms of, extra federal money coming our way to help our schools. So I'm curious as to where the candidates stand on what the biggest challenges are and how we can turn that into the biggest opportunities.
Thank you. Let's start with Peter Fish Case. Your answer, you have up to 2 minutes.
All right, thank you for the question. It has been a difficult year. And again, you're going to hear me repeat the word communication as much as possible and how it's affecting people on a ground level. The money coming in obviously can be applied towards things like a better education, because I believe that without educating our kids, I think a part of the reason that we're here now where we are dealing with a lot of the difficulties is due to a lack of education. When I was talking to some of the principals, I was happy to see that civics was being put back into the day-to-day curriculum. So that warmed my heart. But as far as how to resolve these problems, it's a very fluid situation right now. So communicating and finding out what works and expecting one result or one solution to work for all people, I don't think is realistic. So right now, until we figure out what the common thread is between them all, I think that we have to find that common thread, and that is going to come through kind of individually finding out what each problem is and where the problem is and why it was there, how it got there. And again, it's just going to come back to communication and kind of keeping yourself tethered to the same ground that everybody else is walking. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. Next, I'll ask Deborah Stanford from Dummerston to answer. Deborah, you need to unmute.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. I anticipated this question. After all, that's what this is about, the issues facing this school district. The first one for me is the need to guarantee transparency as the district contends with revelations of sexual abuse and bullying behavior. The district needs to redouble its resolve to create and maintain a safe community for all. There's a need to rehabilitate an aging infrastructure, from heating and ventilation to up-to-date STEM classrooms, vocational workshops, and facilities. I believe there's a need to increase new teacher salaries so that they are earning a living wage immediately. Senior teachers have other needs that are very different from the newbies, and frequently schools neglect to address those needs. We need to support them so they stay in place. There needs to be supportive encouragement for teachers to collaborate and to innovate. And quite frankly, professional development needs to be more than a day at the beginning of the year or a day at the end of the year when everyone is exhausted. Professional development needs to be incorporated into the fabric of the school. And in my opinion, it should be mandatory and not voluntary. In an ideal world, you want teachers to be able to reach out to conferences statewide and nationwide. And there's a need for ongoing increased support for emotional and mental health services. COVID has, did I hear a bell?
Yes,
I did, okay.
thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
And now we'll hear from Shaun Murphy. You need to unmute, Shaun.
There's no question. It's been difficult. The pandemic is unprecedented in terms of the challenges that are presented. But as I said in my remarks, I believe that the district has moved forward to make things much more successful than they would have been otherwise. The recovery plan has been carefully thought out by the central office, the superintendent, our curriculum coordinators, and the principals, and it's implemented to a large degree. And it's also extremely important to realize that the federal government and the state government realized that, yes, these are difficult times, and the ESSER funds have been a wonderful tool to achieve the things that need to be done. Ventilation work that Frank Rucker has been working on so diligently for so many years, upgrading all kinds of projects to make the schools more fuel efficient in terms of heating and cooling. So I'm heartened by the dedication that I see. It's not to say that we don't have problems. We definitely do. But I see it as a continuation of change, as something that needs to go on and will go on. So I'm very heartened because I've been able to, become friends with many teachers, administrators, and parents of students. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Lana Dever of Brattleboro.
So to agree with what everyone else has already said, these have been really challenging times. There's no doubt about it. But there have been gains as well. This is a defining moment. There is no change without a catalyst. So if you look at the pandemic and you see the ways in which it's redefined our society, some of the things in Brattleboro, thinking about like technology with our students, being able to reach students, making sure that everyone has access to internet. And you can see the students who don't have the support, who don't have the ability to log on or don't have parents with them. I was one of those students who fell through the cracks. And I think that if we can use this moment, and we are, and there are things that the schools that are already doing, we have new social workers and folks are focused more on mental health. I believe that this moment is more than a collection of sorrow and a collection of bad events. I think that it's an opportunity for growth, and it's an opportunity for us to reconfigure our society and figure out where we want to go and what we believe in. I also agree with the infrastructure. I think that, thinking about health and ventilation, all of those things that hadn't been done. I mean, there's a big push to change infrastructure in this country, and those things aren't going to get done unless they absolutely have to. So additionally, I do think that, we're seeing the strain on our teachers. And I think a lot about our paraeducators who, when there is when something happens that they don't get a payday, they don't get paid for that, or they're not paid well enough. And we're relying quite a bit on our teachers. And so this is a moment to really take stock and say, what do we value? And are we going to place our time and energy and money in the things that we say that we value? And additionally, I think the last thing I would say is mental health. This is a fantastic moment. We're all thinking about our mental health. It's such a big conversation these days. And I'm so excited to hear students talking about self-care and how they're doing, and in the classroom having morning circles now, and restorative processes. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll turn to Jeff Potter from the Commons for a question that all 4 candidates will answer.
All right. Excuse me. I want to go back to when Cindy was introducing the procedure for voting, and how the instructions felt kind of squirmy with you're individually representing towns, and yet the entire district votes on you. There's really no way to get around that feeling like they're trying to do a couple of things, force a couple of things together. And so in that spirit, I want to ask you all, how do you reconcile the local representation of individual 4 towns and all of those individual schools with the overarching challenges to the district as a whole, especially during a time with overwhelming issues like COVID and investigations of past trauma, and you certainly mentioned some of those in your answers to Melanie's question, but that's kind of that's kind of a far-reaching question, but I think that it kind of gets to the nature of this very new district and where towns individually fit in, and I'd love to know what all 4 of you think about that.
Thank you. This time we'll start with Deborah Stanford of Dummerston. Deborah, you have up to 2 minutes.
It's an interesting question, and I think it's very important that the board not micromanage within a school. The schools are integral units. They're all very, very different, and I'm looking forward to the numbers lightening up in the spring so I can actually go on site and visit a school. I do know that going into a classroom is exceedingly awkward as an unknown entity sitting there. But certainly walking down the hallway, talking to departments, talking to individual teachers, and most especially talking to students and families. So I'm looking forward to actually visiting every school to get a better sense of their idiosyncratic differences. But we are a merged district. And I think what I have seen is attention to the individual schools, that the administrators are front and center. I would love to see student representation, students from Dummerston on the board, so that they can communicate what their needs are. I do think it's about listening and listening to what my community is feeling. So I hope that answers the question. It's a difficult question. I hope that does it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Shaun Murphy from Guilford.
Yeah, actually, I don't think it's a difficult question. In 2019, and actually long before that, the state made very clear, State Board of Education and the AOE, that this is what is going to transpire. And so that started 3 or 4 years before the actual merger took place. The state put out incentives for towns if they wanted to merge prior. Some towns in the state did avail themselves to that. But when it came right down to it, and we had a vote in all towns for all representatives, to me, it seemed like a natural occurrence. And it seemed to me that, yes, we are all directors for a unified school system that are trying to make sure that all students within all 9 schools are totally equitably cared for. And I think it's been largely successful. I'm on the Guilford Leadership Council. If you go to the Guilford Leadership Council and you go to the Guilford School, you'll see unbelievable structures that have been erected, and the students, a lot of them are outside every day, all day long. And other schools, I know Putney's done that. Dummerston has done very innovative things, as has Oak Grove and Academy with their big new addition. I was, up front and center. I went to every meeting having to do with the Academy addition. So I consider myself an individual that lives in the town of Guilford, but I consider myself an advocate for all students in all 4 towns. Thank you.
Thanks, Shaun.
Thank you. And now we'll go to Lana Dever of Brattleboro.
I absolutely love the merged schools. We live in such small communities, but we are all together. I mean, you can live in Guilford and work in Brattleboro. There's so much cross, movement between those lines. They might as well not exist. And I think that having a unified and merged school district allows us to share resources. And it's absolutely one of my favorite things to do is to figure out who needs what and to share it. And so from what I've heard already is that the social workers, for instance, are going between the schools. So it allows for more resources. If you can't afford to hire someone for just the one school, but then you're able to use them, then you have more ability to support the students and support the teachers. And additionally, I think that the more voices that you have in a room, the more you can get done. We don't get things done if there are just 5 of us sitting alone and we've all lived here, we know each other. Bringing everyone in and hearing what everyone has to say is how we're able to work together. And I think it's absolutely fantastic. I, like Deborah, am thrilled to be able to visit all of the schools and get to know the students. I've already done some work at Oak Grove School when I worked at the bookseller, and I absolutely enjoyed getting to meet those kids. And I feel like each school is like a little microcosm. They do things slightly differently, but when they're able to work together and share that, it's going to be a much more vibrant and thriving community, and it already is. So, thank you.
Thank you. And now Peter Fish-Case from Brattleboro.
So I'm going to agree with Deborah and say that this is a difficult question because there's a myriad of different ways to answer this. But I guess my whole takeaway on answering this question is that there is no one individual that's more important than the next. And to kind of echo what Lana just said is when you have a merged district, you have the opportunity of sharing resources and bringing those resources together so that you can all work towards one common good. And also, and Lana also said this as well, there's a blurred line between our towns. We all kind of are doing the same thing at the same time. So why not just extend that to our school districts and support them in those efforts with understanding that everybody's an individual. But if this one individual is saying this and another individual is saying that, completely polar opposites, again, there's no one person that is more or less important than the other. So when we're dealing with, how these towns fit together, I like it. And it does present some problems because Dummerston will run different than Guilford, and Guilford will run different than BAMS. And but it's just it's exciting to see how they can all work and how one idea can go to another school that might be a really good, fair and equitable idea. So that's how I kind of view all of this fitting together.
Thank you. We will take questions from the public now. I want to remind you to rename yourself and add the town in which you reside. We'll only take questions from residents of this school district. Jamie has put in the chat directions for how to rename yourself. So if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand. You can do that by hovering over the bottom of your screen and clicking on reactions and press the raise hand button. Not seeing any raised hands, I'm going to take a question.
Cindy Curtis Reed has raised his hand. I'm looking in the participant function.
I'm sorry.
If-
Chris, I
Yeah,
didn't
if you click on the bottom of your screen, you'll see participant and then you'll see raised hands more clearly.
Thank you. Curtis, please unmute and ask your question.
Great, thank you. I have 3 short questions. The first question is, the elephant in the room in terms of progress appears to be VSBIT that covers the insurance for school boards, the unions, and the professional associations, like the Vermont Principals Association, School Boards Association, Superintendents Association, that have a history of squelching innovation. How will you negotiate on behalf of families for that? Then the second quick one is, we have 40 years of innovation in our classrooms, yet the youth risk behavior studies survey results have been virtually unchanged in terms of kids of color and their experience in the classrooms or in our social environment in our schools. What contributes to that lack of progress? I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it with those 2.
Thank you, Curtis. Please remute yourself and we'll start this time with Shaun Murphy. Shaun, you have up to 2 minutes.
I'll go to the second question because I'm afraid I didn't really totally understand the first question. Or maybe I'll stay with the first question and see if I can get at the genesis on it. You said that certain organizations have constraints, have put constraints on the schools. I'm not sure that I have that much experience with that. I'm a little embarrassed to say that if it seems like a big issue and I'm not aware of it. The Vermont Principals Association has a lot to do with sports interaction. I know that there was an issue in Winooski where they had racial things thrown at students in a very inappropriate manner. And I'm not sure that I agree with the way the Principals Association dealt with that. I'm not sure exactly how to deal with it, but it needed to be dealt with for sure. The second one is lack of progress, you said. In terms of, I guess, diversity, racial equity, is that accurate, Curtis?
Yeah, it has to do with the youth risk behavior survey that students fill out every 2 years.
Is that the panorama survey that you're speaking of?
Yeah, this is several of the questions speak to if students are feeling safe in their schools.
Yeah, yeah.
There are questions about ideation around suicidal thoughts, or even
You're just about out of time. If you want to say anything else, you might want to answer now.
All right. Well, unfortunately, I'm not that familiar with the panorama survey. I know it's been talked about a great deal, and it is going to be used in terms of surveying BUHS and BAMs around the sexual allegations. So yeah, I'll keep my head up and try to tune into all the things that you just brought up. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaun. Lana Dever from Brattleboro.
So the first thing that comes to my mind, Curtis, when I hear your question is I think about Zane. young student at the middle school who was the target of racist harassment and bullying. And what stands out most to me is not that children are cruel, but that the administrators and teachers didn't have the right tools or didn't feel equipped to respond to him in a way that was going to make him feel supported and create change. So I think that we have to be not afraid of using the word white or using the word racist, and understanding that racist is not a slur. White is not a slur. To say homophobic is not a slur. And I think that it's an opportunity for us to look at who we're hiring for teachers and look at how we're supporting the teachers we have. You know, what are we doing to make sure that teachers feel supported, teachers feel like they can bring up concerns when they have them, that they can support students who need support, and that when they hear words like, you know, someone's being racist, that they can respond with intention. And so I think it has to start with bringing everyone to the table, and we have to really look at job descriptions, we have to really look at support, what education folks are getting, and in everyone's job description, it should say you have to be committed to anti-racist practices. And being anti-racist is an act. You have to actually live it. You know, we all have bias, we live in the society, we can't help it. And so every day we have to confront that and we have to do better until it becomes the norm. And I think it will. And I've already seen how our community has surrounded Zane. I've already seen how folks are coming out and in support. I myself was a part of a letter in the Reformer for him. And I think we're getting there, but we really have to be unafraid to call out what is happening and to do the hard work. Because the fact is, every couple of years in Brattleboro, something racist happens at the high school and we all have to deal with it. Whether it's the mascot or, you know, a new club that pops up. We clearly have a societal issue. And I do think that we're working on it. And I know that folks are invested. Thank you.
Thank you, Lana. Peter Fish Case, would you like to answer?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Curtis. Just quickly addressing the unions and those sorts of things. I think that they become less of a factor if the people that we're dealing with firsthand feel more supported. And I don't think that they lean towards these sorts of unions and help for, you know, very frustrating situations. I too was following the Zane story closely and felt that there was just a lot of tragedy around it. And the one thing that we don't have the right to do as a society is to tell somebody how they're feeling or what they heard or how they felt when they heard it. And I think bringing in that level of understanding into the conversation and allowing that student at that particular time to feel as though the people that he needs to rely on have his back on 110%. And I think that some administrators in the middle school do have that child's back, but always room for improvement. No question about it. And this all happens with conversations like the one we're having tonight. I mean, ideas, some of the things that I've learned from some of the questions and some of the answers, you know, I mean, we're in a constant learning process. And as long as we keep our minds open and listen to everybody and how everybody feels in a respectful manner, I think we can eventually overcome it. There is a lot of good work being done and stepping in the right direction. But, you know, diversity is going to be a big piece of making it stick, the glue that kind of binds all of that together. So I'm hoping that answered your question.
Thank you. And Deborah, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, and quite frankly, in the interest of 2 minutes, I really want to address the second half of your question, the why. Diversity just goes so far, but if there's no support system in place, it's meaningless. These eruptions are going to be frequent and toxic. I was disappointed that there was not a stronger statement from administration stating clearly that harassment and bullying behavior will not be tolerated. It goes contrary to the social contract that has to exist as we come together, adults and students. So much of this, for me, goes back to issues of professional development. Lana said at a board meeting, it's got to have a trickle-down effect. And so additional training for every adult, not that adults are failing, but we need to be more acutely aware of students, what they're saying, what they're doing, when they're in the hallways, the cafeteria, when they assume that an adult is not present. If an adult overhears in passing and does not respond to inappropriate remarks, that adult is complicit, and every student knows that. BAMS has been dealing with a dreadful year, aside from everything else, the death of 2 seventh graders in 1 year. And I think to myself, there must be support in place to deal with the grieving adults and students on site and all their questions of uncertainty. Why not use those same systems that are in place and tweak them slightly to address the needs of the student who was the recipient of bullying behavior, as well as the students who exhibited inappropriate behavior? Everyone needs to be supported, and suspension is not the means to support students. It takes place in-house. The problem has to be solved in-house with support in-house. And that kind of work, thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you. I see another hand. I'd like to make the point that both Deborah Stanford and Shaun Murphy are running unopposed. If you'd like to direct your questions specifically to Lana and Peter, you are free to do so. Jody, I see your hand. Please unmute and turn on your video, although that's not required, and state your name and your town. Thank you.
Am I on?
Yeah.
Hello.
I hear you, Jody. I don't see you, but it's not
Okay,
necessary.
never mind. I've got it here now. I'm going to switch a little bit to financial at this point. I am concerned. There's a whole lot of money that's coming down. And I hear so often, oh, we've got all this money to spend. I am concerned that this money is not going to last more than 2 or 3 years, and we won't have this extra money. So I would like to ask the candidates how they feel they would like to spend the money for the best benefit. Thank you.
I'll let any candidate answer who chooses.
I'd love to jump in if I could.
Shaun?
That's a very good question, Jody. You know, I've learned that the money that is coming, it has very specific constraints on it, and you have to do everything administratively to make sure you comply with all of the requirements. Our business administrator has worked very hard to use those funds for improving school buildings, as I said before, with the ventilation. Guilford and Brattleboro and Putney have been the big recipients, and some of the, I think, maybe Academy with the addition. So it's money that has been very specifically used. And then, of course, there also in the recovery plan, hiring extra help for students in terms of counselors. And then I think the other part of your question was, what's going to happen when we get to that cliff in 2024, when those funds will be expended and there won't be those funds? There have been methodologies suggested on how to do that. Our demands hopefully will be less once the pandemic is over and the recovery is initiated and come to fruition. And so I hope that we can handle that. The Independent Budget Review Committee does a nice job of that, explaining that exactly on the last page of their report. So I would recommend everybody get a copy of that report and really read it thoroughly. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to remind everyone that if you're not a candidate or asking a question, please turn off your video. Thank you. Lana, it looked like you wanted to answer this question. Is that right?
I did, thank you.
Go ahead.
I think it's a fantastic question, and it's certainly an integral part of being a board member. From my perspective, I don't come into the board assuming that I know everything. I come into the board knowing that I'm working with a team who's been looking at this budget, has been looking at these numbers for a long time. And I plan on doing the hard work of doing the deep dives into the budget. I have some ideas about, infrastructure is important, but as the person who just spoke before me, whose name is now sorry, as one of my colleagues just said, the money is really earmarked, and you have to really use it intentionally. So within those confines, I think that there are folks who are working really hard right now to figure out the money. And having visited some of the school board meetings and listening to Jackie, whose seat I'm running for, talk about how excited she is about looking at those spreadsheets and those budgets, I plan on sitting down with her and really crunching those numbers and gaining all of her enthusiasm and joy for the budget, and talking to everyone and figuring out what they need. I don't think it's a one person decrees what needs to be done, and I certainly don't think I'm that person, but I know that I can work with the folks who are doing the work. Thanks.
Thank you. I see other hands. Curtis, you already asked a question, so I'm going to call on other folks first. Maggie Foley from Guilford, please unmute and turn on your video if you will.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to alert that I think there are people in the waiting room who are waiting to get in.
Ah, thank you, Maggie. I see a hand from Molly Stoner from Dummerston. Molly.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I'm a teacher in Dummerston and a resident of Dummerston, and I have a question about the structure of board meetings and just the priorities of the board for those meetings. I've been to a lot of them in the last few years, and they tend to run quite long. And there's this balancing act, obviously, to take the voice of the public and also to process important issues and do the work of the board in an expedient way. And I'm wondering what ideas you all have for the structure of those meetings and setting priorities so that the members of the public don't find themselves at 3.5-hour meetings waiting to speak on a topic they felt passionate about. Thank you.
Would any of the candidates like to answer that? Deborah?
So, sure. Board meetings are long. They are unwieldy. I think some of the issues that came up recently occurs when the agenda is suddenly changed, or something that necessitates the board to go into executive session. And I think about one particular meeting that left the community hanging, waiting for the board to come back into the space. That happened once or twice in the last 6 months. That's it. Somehow or the other, the meetings are long. There's a lot of cross discussion. I wish there were more cross discussion. Some of the presentations that are made could actually be sent as an email to board members so that they can be assessed beforehand and appropriate questions asked of administrators at specific schools. I go into this knowing that this commitment on my part is time consuming. I have a lot to learn. This is a world of collaboration, and collaboration means patience, and it means being quiet and listening and understanding that people are in different places from perhaps where I am, and finding that middle ground. It's a process, and it is time consuming. So I go into this process knowing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Is there Peter, would you like to answer?
Sure. I mean, and Deborah alluded to that these meetings can often get unwieldy, and they get very long, and they're fatiguing sometimes to watch, especially if you are just there for one specific issue for that particular meeting. I think it is incumbent on the board to really let committees do their work and bring that best foot forward, so that by the time it gets to the board, that the board just need vote on it, trusting that they have the correct people in the committee. I know that that's slightly imperfect, but it mostly on a lot of issues could really kind of shorten the amount of time that we are there, leaving more time open for the communication that I'm always speaking of. But if we govern the board in such a way that our committees are doing what they are charged to do offline when we are online in a meeting, that we can kind of quickly move through agendas with brief explanation, vote, move on, and get on to maybe some more issues that are a little bit harder to tackle.
Thank you. Shaun, I see you have your hand raised.
I just wanted to say very briefly that about a year ago, we did say that the meetings will be 2 hours, and they have been. And then if in the meeting we get to something and then we have to take some more time, there could be a motion made that would extend the time in the meeting. And that seems to work pretty well. I would also say that whoops, I just lost everything here. But I would also say that, well, never mind. I'll be back later. Thanks.
Thank you, Shaun. Lana, you'd like to add something?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I think it's an important one. The meetings are long. And for me, ultimately, I answer to my community. I think of the board as a collaboration between the community and the board. And so if the community is feeling as if their needs aren't being heard, if they're not being met, then that requires, some discussions with the board members. And I've already seen that I think that the board members are really interested in hearing from what folks have to say and making time for it. My dream is that everyone would attend our school boards, that everyone would feel as if they had a seat at that table and their voices would be heard. I want the students there. I want the teachers there. I want everyone there. And I'm excited to advocate for community members to be able to have time to speak.
Thank you. I'm going to read a question that was submitted through the Commons. It's from Mike Morwicki, who is one of your representatives from the Windham 4 district to the State House. Even before COVID, childhood trauma was a large contributor to the struggles of children and families. Please share your understanding of current upstream services for trauma and what you would suggest to enhance those services to address these root causes for so many problems. Thank you. Lana, would you like to answer that?
Sure. As a trauma survivor myself and someone who works with a community that has suffered a lot of trauma and PTSD, I'm well aware of the challenges that face the students in our community who suffer from trauma and ongoing trauma. They're not just, it's not just something that's happened, it's still actively happening to our students. Luckily in Brattleboro, we have quite a few organizations, Youth Services is one, working to support those students and to make sure that they have other avenues outside of whatever's happening at home. I think there are some things that are already being done currently in schools to support those students. And our community is only as strong or as great as the most marginalized among us. So until everyone is free from trauma, then we are all a traumatized society. Thank you.
Thank you. Shaun, you'd like to answer?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I've been on the board for a long time in various one ilk or another. And it seemed to me that when we used to have students come before the board for something that had happened, that there were times when the student came just with tons of support. Care providers, parents, just like they'd show up and it'd be a group of people helping this child, this student. And I don't think that happens to the degree that it used to. And I think that it would be really good if it did. As a perfect example, Zane's issue, if that could have been, immediately seen as something that need to be dealt with, and a lot of people got involved, I'm sure that the outcome, and I think Lana referred to that, I think the outcome could have been, more positive, and have it actually transpire more quickly, which there's always advantages to that kind of a response. So thank you.
Thank you. Peter, you'd like to respond?
Sure. I mean, dealing with trauma, we wish we didn't have to. So for me, it comes down to the support we're giving the people who have to deal firsthand with the trauma, the support that we have to give to the child who is dealing with the trauma. It all comes down to an unconditional support, of really just being able to take this child or this person and just support them and know that trauma is just a horrible occurrence that happens every single day. But if we just throw your weight behind it and support the people who are feeling the trauma, I think we can move the needle on at least slowing that bus down a little bit.
Thank you. I'm going to call on Liz Adams. Liz, please unmute and turn on your video and tell us what town you're from, please.
I'm from Putney and I am currently on the board. Okay, it was two things. First, I wanted to address something Curtis said about FISBIT and the VSA and the VPA. That's a political part of being on the school board. It means keeping track of what's going on in Montpelier. And our chair has spent untold hours staying on top of that. So that's something people might want to keep in mind because they're always getting up to something up there. And that political force that Curtis spoke about, those organizations all tend to reinforce each other. So when you're trying to change something that they don't want changed, you have to be very loud and vocal and with tons of support to try to address that. So it's a question, it's a comment. Long meetings, that has to do with being a merged district. That's the beginning and end of that, because there are benefits to being merged, but this area, we did not want to merge our schools. Every town lost their school board of 5 members. The board is trying to compensate for that. And we do in different ways. We have the leadership councils, but the dynamic is still out there. And we haven't had to face any tough things like other forcibly merged districts in this state have had to address, like, oh, we're going to close that school because we want to save money and we can ship all the kids to this school. We don't have that problem. We have a very steady student population, but people in towns are still sensitive to it and they miss their local school boards. We did shorten meetings.
Liz, I'm going to interrupt you. Do you have a question for one of
I do. How would you address this issue of people missing their local school boards? And yet we have limited our school board meetings, but they have been long. How do you make people feel included when they're missing something that they've had in the past?
Peter, I'm sorry, you'd like to answer that?
Sure. I'll take a crack at it. Again, it's all about involving them in the conversation, giving them a conduit to the board to serve and have their voice being heard at a higher level. Perhaps another committee that does just that could be rolled out to serve that need. When talking about my wanting to run for the school board, especially after the merged district board, somebody had suggested that there were more honorable ways to die. I had I had suggested that I'm always up for the task. I always like the fight. I like the conversation. And sometimes that conversation will get loud and unruly. But again, if you are just having the conversation, I feel like we can empower everybody to feel empowered to say something to whomever gets elected. I mean, that's my vision, that everybody has a path to talk to somebody on that board, to have some action laid out and rolled out for them, speaking for them.
Thank you. Lana, did you want to answer this question?
Yes, I wanted to say that I believe that this is something we say at Youth Services, and it carries me throughout my life, which is that relationships are the intervention. And I think that as a school board member, what I plan to do is to visit all the schools and to forge relationships. And I already have relationships in all of our surrounding communities because, as I said, we're all interconnected. And I think that having those conversations and being a part of those schools will make the difference and allow for us to merge together. I mean, it's a new situation and it's going to take some time. So.
Thank you, candidates. I appreciate you being briefer with your answers. The questions are piling up, so thanks for that. Deborah, you wanted to answer?
I think that we need to talk about ways of encouraging families to be more active, to attend school board meetings, to feel invested. And maybe one way of doing that is to encourage students to send representatives to school board meetings. So, and that will draw the family in, especially as we consider the incorporation of Afghani children into these schools. We want their families to feel a part of it, and that means outreach.
Thank you. Shaun?
Yeah, I just say, the leadership councils are a wonderful way for people within the towns to be involved. That'd be one very important thing. And the other is, with the Zoom meetings, it's not unusual for us to have 50, 75 people at a meeting. So there is good participation.
Thank you. I'm going to bring a question from the Putney Central School Leadership Council. If the state drops masking in schools, how will you approach our district masking? Many of our kids and families with autoimmune conditions that make them vulnerable need this protection. What would be your approach? How do you plan to look at, no, I'll just stop with that. What would be your approach? Anyone want to answer that? Lana, you've had your hand up nonstop. You want to answer this one?
I'm happy to answer.
Really, I only want to ask
I think it's a
fantastic if you want to answer, but otherwise, please lower your hand. Peter, I see you've raised your hand. Go ahead.
I do want to answer, though. I will answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lana, and then Peter.
I think it goes back to relationships and community. I mean, we have to think about protecting those vulnerable members of community. And the fact is, like, most of us haven't really gotten sick the past 2 years. That's pretty fantastic. I think that we have to find ways of protecting folks and keeping some of the things that we've learned through this pandemic. It won't be the last, right? So we need to take these tools and we need to use them and make sure that we're really thinking about each other in a caring and compassionate way. Thanks.
Peter?
So, I mean, that's a 500-pound question. The masking debate that goes on. It's confusing. It's hard to follow. I'm a science guy. I'm not sure when science got questioned. I don't know when that started. I know when it started to happen, but I'll leave that part of the conversation out. But I am just, it is really difficult. And again, I think that, it might even come down to just involving more conversation about how everybody is feeling, because you do have to recognize that I might be a healthy male adult, but might be standing next to somebody who is compromised and, doesn't want to take the risk. And so we have to be respectful of all that, but there is no easy answer to that question. And I love to debate it. I loved it. I love that it was brought forward, but it is just not a simple, we'll tell them to mask, or if they say not to mask, we'll tell them not to mask. It's just not that simple.
Thank you, Deborah.
Oh, golly.
Deborah, you've muted yourself. Do you want to answer this
Yes,
question?
I'm sorry. Sorry about that. I think about friends who, everybody is exhausted by masking. We lose, children lose so much. They need to see the full face. They need to see the mouth. We need to see them to understand how they're doing and how they're feeling. It's a slippery slope. This is brand new for all of us, and we are learning every step of the way. It's a changing world. There is going to be a problem, as Peter just said, in a situation where one child is free of a mask and the other is not. An adult teacher might need to mask, whereas another one might. And so we have to be really sensitive to tensions that are going to exist in communities over this issue. Just really, really sensitive and careful about for all of us. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one other question that came into the comments online. This is from Jackie Reynolds. I believe it's pronounced Jackie, but I'm not sure. As you know, our district is conducting an investigation into sexual assault allegations that could possibly lead to accusations against current staff members. As a board member, how do you feel that the district should proceed with regard to employment for an accused individual? I will mention that Melanie and Jeff are supposed to be able to have time now to close out the meeting. I'd like to give at least one or two candidates the chance to answer this question before they do. I see no hands raised. Oh, Peter?
I might regret answering this one, but I think we do have to let the investigation play out. I think that we need to find out what that is, and if it comes to a point where it is really starting to implicate somebody who is currently within our school system, we're going to have to take a really hard look at that. We live in a country where you're innocent until proven guilty, but I think I hope in my heart that everybody feels that dynamic changes when we're involving people who are vulnerable. So if somebody that is still within the school system is implicated over and over and over again during this investigation, I speaking from my heart, I feel that person needs to be removed. That would be the way I would react to that.
Thank you. Lana?
So this is simple. Listen to survivors. End of story. When there are credible accounts of sexual assault, that teacher should be removed immediately. Let the investigation play out, and then we move on. But we have to start listening to people. And then we also need a societal shift. There's a lot of healing that has to be done. There's a lot of trauma that resulted from that particular teacher, and we need to talk about it. We need to come together as a community, and we need to support the folks who were affected by it and continue to live that trauma. Thank you.
Thank you. Curtis, I'm sorry, we've gone a little over time. I trust you'll reach out to candidates and ask the question you weren't able to ask in the second go round. So I will turn it over to Melanie and or Jeff for their closing comments.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for listening in on this this conversation and back and forth exchange of ideas. This is really why I got into community journalism and why I love community journalism, to get people involved, get the information out there, and get everybody working together as a community. And again, thank you to those who put this together and to BCTV. That's it.
Yep.
And don't forget to vote.
Yeah, everything Melanie said, and I want to add that one of the biggest joys that I have as a newspaper editor in your community is editing the voices section and your letters to the editor. longer contributions. Don't forget, this is for us as a weekly. Our next issue is the last before town meeting day. We would love to see your contributions. I know that Melanie, I could speak for Melanie for the reformer too. So our address, voices@commonsnews.org. Melanie is letters at recorder.com.
News@reformer.com.
I'm sorry, news@reformer.com. So thank you for using your newspapers and supporting your newspapers and being part of the democratic process. And we love seeing things like this. And once again, I want to thank BCTV. I want to thank enormous thanks to Cindy and Jamie for their efforts with this. It was super smooth, and of course to all the candidates. I know some of you. I want to know all of you better, and I hope that however this election plays out, I hope that all of you will be part of this conversation in the ways that you're meant to be. So. Thanks for letting us be part of your world here.
Thanks to the Reformer and the Commons for sponsoring this forum. And I know we can count on you both to include in your paper how everyone can vote. Use the knowledge you've gained tonight to do so. I'd like to thank the candidates. I'd like to thank all of you who participated. Respectful questions, insightful questions. I appreciate your answers. Thank you all. Now go do your duty and vote. Thank you. Have a good evening.